You may know that private equity has taken over Red Lobster, KMart, and Toys R Us. Maybe you've heard that they've taken over nursing homes, dentist offices, and veterinarians. But did you know that private equity has also been making it harder for you to buy a home? Look, America is in a housing crisis. The country is facing a shortage of 7 million affordable homes. And because of that shortage, housing prices and rents are skyrocketing. It is so terrible that the median age for a first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. First-time home buyer. And look, it's bad, and Wall Street is making it all worse. Here's the problem. Wall Street has started looking at your neighborhood as an investment opportunity. Your home and your neighbor's homes, all just pawns to make a buck for them. Private equity and Wall Street firms have bought up around 500,000 homes all across this country. In some areas, in fact, like Atlanta or Charlotte, they own 1 out of every 4 homes. And on top of that, they own more than 2 million apartments and are the single biggest landlord of mobile homes in America. The consequence of private equity's housing grab is twofold. So let's start with the first one. Let's say you're trying to buy a house. You penciled it out, you figured out what you can afford, you've got an inspection because you want to make sure the house doesn't have major issues that are going to cost you a lot to repair later on. Standard process, right? Except then you put in your bid and lose it. Why? Because you get scooped out by some billionaire investor who makes an all-cash offer and agrees to skip the inspection. And that's what's happening to a lot of home buyers. And that's only one part of the private equity problem. Part 2 is about renters, because here's what happens. Private equity and Wall Street firms buy up a ton of houses and apartment buildings in a city, and then they own enough of the rentals in one area that, like any good monopolist, they can start pushing up the prices. Let's be clear. We're not talking about your local mom and pop landlord or the independent management company that handles day-to-day of a few apartment buildings in your area. We're talking about private equity giants trying to make an extra buck by buying up so much housing that they have consolidated market power and they can squeeze everyone on rent because people have nowhere else to go. So home buyers are seeing homes disappear from the market, and renters are seeing higher prices and a lot of junk fees. And here's the really scary thing. It's bad, and it's getting worse fast. Private equity's housing grab has increased rapidly in just the last couple of years. So I think it's time to do something about it. We're working in Congress right now to tackle this issue. We've taken a good first step with bipartisan legislation this week that would ban private equity from competing with you as you're trying to buy a home. That's right, ban them. Just tell them no. These giants can't stomp into people's neighborhoods and start throwing around their cash and buying up all the homes. So look, I'm proud of this new bill, and it's actually going to get a vote in the Senate in the next few days, and I'm hopeful we're going to get it signed into law soon. But I got to add this part. More action is needed. Last week, I introduced a bill with Senate Democrats that would go even further to tackle Wall Street and private equity's dominance in apartments and in mobile homes, and empower the antitrust cops on the beat to make sure that corporate landlords are not buying up too much in any one area. This is just one piece of the puzzle for combating the housing crisis. Look, we need to build more housing for everyone, everywhere. We need more housing for first-time home buyers, housing for seniors, housing for renters, housing for people with disabilities, housing for the homeless, housing for urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas. We just don't have enough housing, and we need to build more. But there's good news on this front. Congress is moving forward right now on the biggest law in decades that would help address housing supply and help lower costs. It's actually a bill that I introduced with Senator Tim Scott, and our legislation would build more homes. How? By making it easier to build and easier to finance new housing construction, by streamlining permitting so it's faster to build, and by rewarding cities and towns that have a track record of successfully building more housing for their residents. In the middle of the 2008 housing crisis, I went to Nevada to hear from people who'd lost their homes. And one of those people was Mr. Estrada. He wore a jacket over his t-shirt. He had on a red U.S. Marine Corps baseball cap. He and his wife both worked. They had stretched their budget to get their two girls into a good school and buy a home. Their home meant everything to them. It was right across the street from the school, so they could see their girls playing outside when they opened their garage door. But the Estradas had gotten tangled up with one of the fancy new mortgages the smart boys on Wall Street were peddling. And when the payments on their mortgage suddenly jumped, they just couldn't keep up. Mr. Estrada tried to negotiate with the bank, and then suddenly the bank just sold his home at auction. When I met Mr. Estrada, he and his wife and his two little girls were living in their van. And as Mr. Estrada told his story, he had tears in his eyes. And I did too. And I still think about his story because it's a powerful reminder of what housing means. Housing is the biggest expense for most American families. In fact, it's the biggest purchase most Americans will ever make in their lifetimes. But it is so much more. Housing also affects the jobs you can get to, the schools your children can go to, and the kinds of communities that you can live in. It can even affect your health. That's why it is so important that our government gets housing policy right. And that's why I believe we need to do more to lower housing costs. We need to get Wall Street out of housing, and we need to build more homes so that everybody in this country has a shot at home ownership. I believe in us. We can do this, so let's get it done.